everybody, this is Emmy at Astro. I am here with Brad, our project estimator for the architectural division here at Astro. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks.
We're going to talk a little bit about your job duties and things like that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your history at Astro and kind of how you got into your current role?
Okay, I've been with Astro since around 2009, 2010, so
Okay.
I've been here quite a while.
Yeah.
When I started, we were a pretty small crew.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was maybe 6 of us in the shop. Kind of started out as kind of the low man on the totem pole. You know, we did, as a welder, you did your own sawing, shipping, machining, packaging. You did everything yourself, the finishing, all that stuff. So
yeah.
As we've grown, it kind of just jumped into a different role. Whereas, so from like being the shop grunt kind of a guy to being one of the more relied upon welders and becoming the weld supervisor, and then coming up front here to do project estimation.
Okay, that's quite a progression.
That's quite a progression.
And how do you like working at Astro in general?
It's good if I've worked here for like
right.
14 years.
Yeah.
So, no, it's a good place to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, good people. You know, I get along with my team pretty dang well. So
yeah. So you talk about your team. Talk a little bit about the architectural team, who's involved, and how you kind of interact with them.
So Chris is our salesman, kind of the head of the bunch. I interact with him on a daily basis. He's probably the one I'm the most interactive with because as doing the estimation for the sales, kind of work hand in hand.
Yeah.
Tanner's also on our team. Tanner's project manager. So once the estimate actually becomes an order, he kind of jumps in and starts taking off on the whole project.
Okay.
And then we have Justin, who is our drafter in our A team, and he obviously does all the drafting magic and submittals and all that stuff. So.
Okay, cool. So tell us a little bit about your role as project estimator.
So project estimator, pretty much Chris will send me over the request for quote, and then I'll kind of go through and kind of dig into some of the details there and figure out what's important, what's not as important, and you know what really is going to become a cost driver of the project. So then kind of break through all those things, enter it into our software system, and does all of its magic, kicks you out a number, then we put it into our actual sales quote. Okay. Then that gets sent back off to Chris, and then Chris sends that out directly to the customer after he reviews it.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about like the timeline between someone requesting a quote and like it getting back to them?
So that kind of depends on the complexity of the project and how clear some of these things are. Like for example, like just a straight perf panel. I mean, we can whip that out very, very quickly. I mean, within 30 minutes, hour, something like that. If we need to, like I said, it can go pretty darn quick. But if you got multiple different scopes in multiple different areas, I mean, they got some quotes that you spend a whole week on, 2 weeks on. Sometimes you got a lot of time into some of these quotes.
Yeah.
But in different customers, you know, they ask for like certain customers will ask us to take on a whole scope of work.
Okay.
So like those are the ones that usually take a while to get through because you're estimating 5-10 different things in that scope, and then sometimes you have to do multiple scopes. So then you got bink, bink, bink. You're multiplying that by 3-4 different times. So there's sometimes a lot of stuff to go through.
And as you receive kind of these requests for quotes, talk a little bit about the different ways that they come in. Like I know sometimes we just get requests on the website like, hey, I'm looking for a quote on this size panel for this. Don't you also get some requests that are like, here's the blueprint of the whole plan, you know, find the things that you can work on?
Yeah. So like some of those where you get the whole scope or you're supposed to quote a whole scope, you usually get the whole big package of prints, spec sheets, all that stuff. So you're kind of going through 1,200, 2,000 pages of stuff, and you have to really identify what exactly our scope is.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones, like you've had very descriptive. They just send you a direct email saying, you know, hey, I want you to quote this, 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 and this. And we'll give you these 3 items, and then or 4 items, and then they actually send you like just those specific pages that you need to provide them a quote. Other times you get a napkin with a drawing on it sometimes, and here's your hand sketch, here's are the details, generate me a price off that.
Yeah.
So other times we get like through like the web Building Connected and other those programs and stuff will they'll come directly through us, and you know, then Chris will pass that off here, look into this one, and see what we got.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your process then. As you know, you get a request. What is the process from, hey, I want this done, to here is your estimate?
So the quick way of explaining it, I guess, would be Chris will send something over, and I'll kind of dig through it and figure out what I need to ask Chris, because maybe he's had some more conversations and stuff with the customer. But it gets sent over. We create an estimate folder for the customer, create a job folder for the customer, or a customer folder, and then an estimate folder, and then those can turn into go into the job folder eventually. So we get those things. I'll set up the quote in those two folders, and I'll set it up in our system. And then as I dig through it all and kind of figure out some of the details that we need to figure out, I'll go back, ask Chris, like I said, and kind of get the rundown of what he knows of it, what I know of it. And if we still have questions, then usually one of us will just call the customer directly and then figure out those details for the project, because sometimes what you interpret and what they actually need sometimes don't go hand in hand.
A little bit different, yeah.
So,
some of your pain points that you experience when you're trying to do some of these estimates?
Just the quality of the information. Sometimes, like I said, it gets really, really vague, and you're trying to interpret things. And that's usually with like more like budget pricing type of thing, where you get it's usually like a 50% print package, and when you get that, like it just says, here's a steel railing, you know. And sometimes, like even with our perf panels and stuff, they don't even give you they haven't decided on a design, a color, anything like that yet. So with those things, you're kind of using a lot of like historical information, and then using like linear foot, square foot type of numbers to kind of figure that stuff out, because without the details being there, you're assuming a lot of things.
But what's kind of the difference between like just a budgetary estimate and then like a full estimate quote?
The information, like there's some projects where you put the budget number together, and then they want the next stage of number, which is like a 70% print package. So you get a little more information, you can refine your quote a little bit more, and then usually it's like a 90%, your final one you get, and I can take that 90% print package, and it usually has all the details that we know, or everyone knows the intimate information that they need to, and then I can call the customer directly and, okay, here's the last few things I need to make this happen. So you kind of get involved from them trying to get the financing or the budget pricing done all the way through the whole project. So it does change through the whole sometimes, and sometimes it stays the same all the way through. You assumed exactly what it was supposed to be.
How do you deal with customers' budget constraints? Like if you put together a budgetary quote and they say, yeah, that's not going to work, we need it to hit here, how do you kind of work through that?
You can kind of go through some of those details and figure out, okay, like I think one example was we did a stainless railing, and generally a stainless railing, and for us is a number 4 finish. It's got welded caps. Like I said, it's a pretty fancy railing. Where I know in one guy was like, like this is crazy expensive, and it's like, well, this is a number 4 finished railing. This is what it costs. Like this is what it is. And he's like, oh man, he's like, it's in a maintenance area where it only has to be stainless because of the industry we're in.
Okay.
And it's in a maintenance area. It doesn't need to be decorative. No one's going to see it besides the one guy that goes down there, and it's like, well, okay, now I know I don't need to finish it. You know, it can just be a mill product. We can just blend the welds out, and we don't actually have to refinish anything like that. And like knowing some of those details, their budget was thinking one thing, our budget was thinking another way, and then actually getting together and, you know, hey, what do you actually need? And they're actually able to get it down right into their budget, because we finally figured out the details that they actually needed for it to be in budget. Well, we didn't know that from the get-go. Yeah.
Kind of along that same vein, how do you deal with the dreaded word value engineering?
Value engineering. I'm not usually involved very much in that. Usually the value engineering, like we'll have gotten the job, or it'll be way over, or our budget will be overpriced. Well, then the engineer will actually come back and say, hey, you don't need something this thick. You don't need they actually kind of identify more of the the key connection points and stuff like that. What needs to be beefed up, what doesn't need to be beefed up. It kind of gets back to where, what is important to the customer. A lot of the value engineering stuff that I've dealt with has been more of getting rid of decorative things. So like fancy machining or other add-on pieces and stuff. Well, this is what has actually been, the engineer has decided. So now adjust your quote to what the engineer has.
So going back to your process a little bit, once you get a quote in, talk about how you interact with the team as far as like figuring out things for procurement and other elements that go within the quote.
Well, in a quote, a lot of like the procurement type of side that I have to deal with would be more of like the lead times on some of the things, and just to make sure that if the customer is looking for the project to be completed in, say, 8 weeks, that all those lead times will work out for the final end date.
So you don't, as far as like figuring out materials and things like that?
Well, I figure out like material usage and stuff like that. Obviously, you need to know how many sheets you're using for the project, but it's as easy as some things are just you track the linear footage or track the square footage of the material you're using. We have a Cutlass optimizer. We have some software that we used.
So you kind of talked about how you figure out the materials. What about labor? How do you figure out that side of it?
There's a lot of formulas involved, and I guess those formulas have been kind of figured out on my end from being the guy that's run the press brake before, or running the punch, or
having the
being
experience.
the welding. Yeah, just kind of having the experience in the industry of, okay, this is the industry standard of what this is going to take to do this item.
When going back to lead times, what are things that could factor like speeding up a project or slowing it down?
Models.
Okay.
Like that's not necessarily more of the architectural stuff, more like in the industrial, but if you get like a good quality model, it actually has all the pieces broken down, and what we call them smart models. If you get that, it allows us to go through everything faster. It allows the programmers to program faster. It allows the drafter to actually be able to take these items and put them into SolidWorks. And like I said, a lot of it depends on like the software it's drawn in, the model, how good is it. So like I said, a lot of stuff like that really helps make the estimate go quicker.
Okay. So how do you communicate changes to an estimate as things come up?
Usually in the forefront, we try to figure out all of those things from the get-go, so we're not having to do a whole lot of changes. There is sometimes changes that are out of your control. There's due to engineering, stuff like that, and we have different revisions on our quotes. So if I have to make a major adjustment, we'll do like a Rev 2 or Rev 3, and so we'll keep our previous copies of it, so we just have a revision of, okay, this is what changed, this is what changed, and this is what changed, and that's how we kind of keep that in check.
Okay. So what's kind of some of your favorite things about your job and estimating?
Actually, like I've been involved in construction my whole life. When I was a young guy, before I was doing welding, I was actually building houses.
Oh, okay.
I was doing custom framing.
Yeah.
So always kind of been involved with the architectural side of stuff. So just getting to see some of these cool projects that I don't want to name any specific projects, but
Sure.
I've had some where you look at it and 10 years later you drive by and it's like, hey kids, I built that.
Yeah.
Like I actually built it myself by hand. There's other projects where you can point out and say, I estimated that one. I was the weld manager on that one. I actually drilled all the holes, or I machined this, or so I guess I've just being around the architecture stuff, I've always kind of enjoyed it. Always like kind of building stuff, kind of a hands-on type of guy. So it kind of makes sense to, if I'm not building the actual projects anymore, at least kind of come up on the forefront of the projects of how to price them out, or what issues we've run into in the past, and use that knowledge to kick out the estimates. But just being around the architectural side is kind of one of the things I.
Yeah. So as you're going through the estimates and the projects are going through, do you take that knowledge of each project and contribute that to your next estimate? Kind of.
Yes.
How do you go off of past projects and things like that?
So we have usually do a post-project evaluation after the project has gone on, and then I take that data and make sure when I quote something, I need it to fall into a range of of price. for it to be a good project, it's got to fall within this range. You don't want it to be, overcharge your customer, undercharge your customer. So it really needs to stay in this range. So when you do the post project evaluation, if it went good, you kind of do a little bit of a dive into it and see, okay, do I have too much time here or too much material there? And you just kind of fine tune it a little bit for the next time you do it. And when we do certain things like pipe railings and like certain perforated panels, we've got so much data from before, it doesn't make sense to generate a new quote when we can just save that data and say, okay, this is the same as that. And now I just update material prices.
So talk a little bit about material prices, like how much do the Influx, like I know within our quotes, we have a certain time frame on it because of how much material costs can change. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Each supplier is a little bit different with how long they'll hold the price for your quote. So I mean, we have some suppliers that say, hey, your price is only good for 24 hours. Some suppliers will hold it for 90 days. Some will hold it for 60. It kind of depends on how risky the market kind of is. And currently right now, I believe the market's pretty dang stable. We haven't seen a whole lot of material price changes. Quite a few months actually. But usually Zach is keeping an eye on the material prices and giving us a heads up of, hey, the material supplier is saying the stainless is going to go up this month or next month, and you kind of hold on to the seat of your pants and see how much is it going up. But like I said, the market's been pretty stable, so I mean, 1-2 cents a pound really doesn't change a whole heck of a lot on the end.
Okay. So as estimates come in, what do you have, like a favorite type of thing that you like to quote, like as far as panels or railings or some cool stuff?
It kind of depends on the day. I mean, if you're in the, I don't want to think about a whole heck of a lot of stuff today, you're stressed out from life or whatever, perf panels are a pretty slick, easy one where, like I said, and like pipe railings where you have so much previous data that you can just whip them out as quick as you can. And it almost kind of becomes a contest internally of, okay, this one, can I do it in 10 minutes? Can I do this one in 5 minutes? Can I do it in 15? And you just kind of set yourself a goal and try to knock it out as quick as you can. But anything where it's like really complex, I don't like to have that attitude where it's like, I want to dive deep into it and make sure I'm catching everything, because I don't want to come back to our customer later and say, oh yeah, oopsies, I forgot this, or oopsies, I forgot that. I'd rather be the guy of calling the customer and saying, hey, did you notice this? Did you notice that? This is going to affect your price, or does it need this type of quality? Does it need this or that? And kind of, like I said, go into that deep dive into it to make sure that I guess a goal I have would be to make sure that my budget, my 70%, my 90% are kind of being stable. I don't want any big spikes or dips or dives on it. So just they're getting good information the whole time.
So what are some of the things that, as someone's requesting a quote, that when they come back to them that maybe they don't think about? Like for example, I was looking at one the other day that they wanted a perforated privacy fence for a balcony that was between 2 units. And I was like looking at the price of what it would be for this fence. And Chris was like, oh, well, if this is going to be on for 2 units, one end is going to be the back. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 panels for both sides.
Yes.
So what are kind of some of the things that come up that people are like, oh, I didn't even think about that this would be included?
A big one that I get is anodizing. Anodizing is most of the time it's not a solid, deep, rich color where it's not like paint where you can't see the material through it. Whereas anodizing it's got some transparency to it, so you see the scratch from the guy loading the semi at the mill. You see the scratch from the guy unloading the material here. You see the scratches from it being on the laser or the water jet bed. All of those parts, usually they want a uniform finish. So usually having anodizing looked at as cheaper alternative than powder coat. And in reality is there's a lot of labor involved with getting the stuff anodized, because you're finishing the material. When you're putting a weld down, you grind it, now you have to refinish because it's going to be transparent. And even if they you're not refinishing the whole rail. Okay, how do I grind that weld without making it look like a big blotchy spot, because it's going to be a different color when it gets anodized.
Mm-hmm.
So the base finish of the material, we have to handle it differently in the shop. We can't put scratches on it. We put cardboard down on the tables. We do not want to put a deep scratch in any of that stuff, because there's not a good way of getting that scratch out without it being extremely noticeable down the road.
Any others?
Layout of material.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, but material sizes. Material comes in a general size. So whether it's a 20-foot stick or a 21-foot long pipe, or aluminum is usually 24-foot long sticks. If your part is 11 feet long and all I can get is the shortest piece I can get is 20 feet, well, you're throwing 9 feet away every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So and sometimes you see these and it's like, there's nothing I can do. I'm throwing away so much material, because you can't just like, okay, I'm splice two of these together and make it a long piece. That doesn't fly in architectural world. You
right.
can't splice a bunch of pieces together. So yeah, material layout's a big one too.
Okay. And when you come back to the customer with that, how do they usually handle it pretty well, or how does that communication go?
Sometimes with these fences and railings, you can add posts. Mm-hmm. and do stuff where I can add a post, and it actually creates better material utilization, because your 11-footer now turns into 2 5.5-foot pieces. Mm-hmm. So doing stuff like that, where you can actually just, like I said, add a post or add some other feature, something can kind of get you away from some of those things. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. There really is.
Yeah.
So you reach out to the customer and let them know, hey, I'm throwing away 40% of your material. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they don't have very pleasant things to say about it, but usually they know that.
Yeah.
So like I said, a lot of times they've known, yeah, there's high scrap rate on this. We've done some research ourselves and figured that out. So.
Yeah. Is there anything that hopefully some architects and designers are watching this, anything that you want them to maybe know that they didn't know kind of previously?
Like I said, it really kind of comes down to the quality of information that we get to speed up the quoting process. And mm-hmm. If I got to make a lot of guesses and I got to make a lot of assumptions, I'm going over to Justin and, okay, what's the engineer going to say? Because he's the one dealing with the engineer most of the time. We're like, do I need to go this size of tube, or do I need to go this size of tube based on heights and mm-hmm. Stuff like that? Where basically just really, really clear information, where you're not having to make assumptions or having to basically put on an engineer hat and figure out that sort of stuff. Because like I said, you want that. We try to have we don't want that price to change a whole heck of a lot, unless, like I said, there's something drastically changes. We want to give them a good budget number that they can give to their customer and maintain that, so there's not a big shocker of a $50,000 turned into a $100,000 project.
Yeah.
And
right. Maybe the other way, but not. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you talked about some of the things that you like to quote, and I know you didn't want to mention any projects by name, but what have been some of your favorite projects to work on?
This one was a while ago, but I believe down by the Maplewood Mall, mm-hmm. there is a bunch of railings that are alongside the roadways. And that was one of my first big projects that I had built here pretty much predominantly by myself. And mm-hmm. there's like curved railings, all super heavy too, but the whole time I thought the design in the panels were supposed to actually say something, because they look like letters.
Yeah.
And as I was painting it, there was some touch-up stuff that needed to happen on site, so I got sent down there and do some touch-up stuff. And I'm looking at it, and one of the you want to call project managers from the construction company that mm-hmm. installed it was there, and I'm talking to him like, I just don't understand what this is supposed to say. And he's like, it's not supposed to say anything. It's supposed to be blades of grass. And as you stand back, it's like, I'll be danged. They actually look like giant, like someone zoomed in blades of grass. And it's like,
gosh.
Huh. So it's all blades of grass all the way down there. I did not know that.
Perspective is everything, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. We were involved with a project that went to an amusement park a few mm-hmm. years ago, and the quality specifications were kind of funny. We had to have material that could withstand an orca impact.
Sure.
So I can deal with pounds
as
per
one
square.
does.
I can deal with pounds per square inch or stuff like that. But yeah, I've never heard of having to make sure a railing can withstand an orca impact.
Yeah.
Like, how fast does the Orca even go? Like, you see, you're scratching your heads, and everyone's kind of just laughing in this meeting, like, this is really in the spec sheet.
Yeah.
But apparently, it was a thing.
And how did you figure out the impact force of an Orca?
Well, what turns out is that it was a mistake,
okay.
and that it just needed to be our standard. What is it? 200 pounds per foot or something like that. There's the standard requirement for a railing.
Okay.
A guardrail. And that's all we had to abide by.
Okay. Orcas excluded.
Yes.
Funny. Well, that's great. Well, what's kind of your favorite part about working in Astro?
Well, from coming as a welder, and a construction worker, it's really, really nice to be inside of a building that's not, you're not burning wire or standing out in the sun where there's no trees or anything like that. So even in construction, your paychecks are determined by how good the weather is.
Okay.
And sometimes your productivity is, if you got, when I was doing the construction stuff, you're doing siding, sometimes you have to shovel out snow around the house before you can even hang siding. Well, you're not making any money shoveling snow. You're making money hanging siding. So not having to do that sort of stuff, like shovel my own driveway and my own sidewalk. I don't need to shovel round houses.
Yeah.
Like I said, being inside is nice, or when you've had that much experience outside as a laborer. And working with so many of the guys here, as working with them as a welder, and then working with them as their supervisor, and then coming up here and being an estimator. Actually seeing how a lot of the guys have grown throughout the years. We've had some guys here for quite a few years now where I trained them in. I've worked with them as they have now become like a weld supervisor and stuff like that. And they've you get to see them grow as a person and see their growth as an employee. And that's kind of cool to see as someone that came in as a 18-year-old or a 20-year-old kid out of high school or college, something like that, where you actually get to see that whole progression through their welding career, and hopefully that someday they'll be following me
working
right
inside,
inside right behind. So that's pretty cool, seeing some of the guys that you've worked with hands-on for so long actually progress.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for sitting down and chatting with us, Brad. For those of you watching, if you are looking for a quote or an estimate, you most likely are going to receive it from Brad. So look out for him, and thank you for tuning in.